And welcome back, everyone. Attorney Craig Steger here, practicing in Wisconsin, Minnesota, and Iowa. Um, Second day of the new show schedule, which is at supposed to be 5:30 a.m. Central Time. I'm about 15 minutes late today, but no biggie. We're gonna roll. We'll roll with the punches. Um, Today, what I wanted to talk about was plane crashes. Not that anyone really likes talking about plane crashes, but they've been in the news a lot. And I personally don't know a lot about plane crashes from a legal standpoint. Um, I do have one case. I had one client that was injured in a plane crash. I'll talk a little bit about that and then just talk generally. I had to do a little research for this. Actually, found some interesting stuff. So stay tuned for that. So there's been a lot of news, a lot of stories in the news, and it seems like there's a new one every day about either a plane mishap or a very close call. And there's lots of speculation out there as to what's causing it. Is there is there a higher rate than usual, or is it just that we're paying more attention to it now? I'm not entirely sure, but it got me thinking, and A- and of course, as an attorney, I'm always thinking, well, what happens if someone is injured or killed in a car crash, in an airplane crash? It's sort of straightforward. With a car crash, typically you can bring a personal injury, a wrongful death lawsuit against the driver. In some states like Wisconsin, you can sue their insurance company, and most of the time, I would say the suit gets brought in the state where the crash happened, sometimes in the state where where the defendant lives, or sometimes where the plaintiff or the injured person lives. But of course, with plane crashes, it's much more complicated than that. Sometimes, you know, it doesn't happen. Well, sometimes things happen over borders or over water, and so what happens in those cases? So I did a little research, and I was sort of surprised because um, and and I haven't totally verified this. So some of this is ChatGPT, and I did some independent verification. So sort of take this somewhat with a grain of salt, but I believe more or less this is accurate. Is so if it's a at least in the U.S. Okay, so in the United States, if you are involved in a plane crash, it's more or less no different than a car crash or personal injury, which means that you would bring a tort claim, which could be negligence, could be a product's liability if there was some defect with um, the plane or some of the equipment. Um, in some states, I believe there's the equivalent of strict liability because flying an airplane is sort of considered an inherently dangerous activity, and so if someone pays you to fly them around and you crash, it's sort of assumed that this was your responsibility, right? But this beyond that, the lawsuit things are more or less the same. Figure out who you're going to sue and where do you sue them, right? And is it state or federal court? Um, I believe in most states it's going to be, you can certainly sue in the state where the crash happens. And I believe in most states would allow you to sue in the state where air- the um, the airline company has its primary location. Um, I had a I had an I mean, almost by definition, you have multiple states involved, right? Because you have people from different states taking off in one state and most likely landing in another state, although that's not always true, especially for non-commercial flights. But for most of us who fly, we're taking a plane because we want to get from one state to another, right? And so you are almost by definition dealing with interstate activities. I had a case a few years ago, sort of an kind of the sort of an interesting fact pattern. But so the it was a couple, husband and wife, were from Wisconsin, and they were taking, I don't know if it was a charter flight, if that's the right term, but we're flying with a group of other people on a plane that was going to be taking all of them out west, I don't know, to Las Vegas or something for one of these casino trips or something like that. So they were from Wisconsin, brought took off in Wisconsin, so flew out of Madison, and for one reason or another made a stop in Iowa and to pick up some additional passengers, which I don't believe was part of the original itinerary. But the airplane was the company that was doing it was going to stop in Iowa, Waterloo, I believe, and pick up some passengers, and then continue on to, I don't know if it was Arizona or Nevada, or whatever the case may be. Well, during the descent into Iowa, they encountered some bad weather, apparently, or at least there was bad weather in the area, and slid off the end of the runway and came to a pretty abrupt stop, right? And my client was injured as a result of that. A lot of these are older folks, and he was injured, not life-threatening injuries, but badly injured. Like you might be you know, in a car crash, rear end car crash or something like that. And so, when we got involved with that case, I was thinking to myself, well, you know, the the plane started in Wisconsin. The crash happened. The injury, the crash, if you want to call it a crash, happened in Iowa. It was intended to go to Las Vegas. I assume there was probably some contractual language about where you could sue and things like that. And uh, we were able to resolve the case before we started the lawsuit. So I never totally figured out what happened, but it appeared that there was either, it could have been pilot error, probably pilot error. You're not supposed to slide off the end of the runway, but also possibility of error of the air traffic controller, because there's multiple runways at this airport, and this plane attempted to land on a shorter runway, which is not the normal runway, and possibly someone made a mistake there. Um, someone made a mistake there. We never got to the point where we need to figure out who, because we were able to resolve it. But so that's kind of my limited experience with airplane crashes and things like that. But there were the one I was doing some research on recently was the one that the plane that started in Minneapolis, Minnesota, and I think was flying to Canada, and during the landing had a very rough landing and ended up on its top. And fortunately, sounds like no one was killed or maybe seriously injured in that crash. But so what happens in that case? So you have people from all over the place, maybe some Canadian citizens on there flying back from Minneapolis to Canada. But you had an airplane that started in Minnesota in the United States, and then the crash occurred on Canadian soil. And so I got to wondering, okay, so what happens to those people? Do they have to go to Canada to sue? Can they sue in Minnesota? What happened? Is there any fault? There was some indication in some of the reports that I read that it may have had to do with weather. Weather is sort of an act of God, sort of thing. And if, like, they just got some very unexpected turbulent weather, does that give rise to legal liability? I'm not entirely sure. Like I said, I'm not an expert on this stuff. But one thing that I learned that I thought was interesting, and again, this is Chat GPT sort of verified by what I could find online, is for international flights. Let me see if I can find this. So for international flights, there are a couple of options. So let me see here. So let's do this. So for domestic flights, so flights that happen, that start and end within the United States, as I indicated before, those are more or less treated by as normal tort cases. Now, like I said, the difference being there may be strict liability for plane crashes, depending on the states, which state's law might apply, and there may be some rules that states have from a standpoint of jurisdiction of who has jurisdiction over a crash. That, let's say, an incident starts in the skies, right? Pilot error or something happens up there, and the encounter with the Earth is just the location of the crash, but the actual negligence, if you will, happened in the sky. I don't know how you figure that out, where it happened, who's at fault, but if it's a if it's a plane, if it's a commercial flight that stays within the United States, I think it's pretty straightforward. You have to be able to prove fault of some sort. But this is something I didn't know. But for international flights, there is something called the Montreal Convention. And when I saw this originally when I was researching that Delta flight that happened in Canada, and I know it was talking about the Montreal Convention. So I thought that was maybe just because it was happened in Canada, but apparently this is for all international flights. So it says that for international flights, they injury and death claims are governed by the Montreal Convention of 1999. So it's not super old, which it says is a global treaty that limits airline liability, but also provides certain passenger protection. I did not know that. It sort of sounds a little bit like workers' compensation, but for commercial airlines, where it provides a cap for damages, but also provides a floor so that even if no one is at fault, there's going to be coverage, strict liability. So according to ChatGPT, when it comes to the Montreal Convention, there is strict liability. So which means that the airlines are automatically liable, irrespective of proving fault. And it looks like the damages are up to 175 or $200,000. So it must be whatever your damages are up to that. Now, if you're talking about an international crash and people get killed, I think it's going to be pretty straightforward. People are going to max that out. Most injuries from plane crashes are going to be severe at least. But then it seems like it says there is higher damages if you can prove negligence. So if the airline was negligent or reckless, then there's no limit on damages, and that kind of makes sense. That actually is a difference from workers' compensation, because in workers' compensation, it's your exclusive remedy, even if the employer or another employee was negligent. Like, right, it it provides automatic coverage to workers, but it's limited. It looks like when it comes to airline crashes, there's going to be automatically a coverage up to $200,000 if you're injured or killed in a international plane crash, even if it was purely an act of God and no one made a mistake. But if someone made a mistake and you could prove it, then it's a normal suit. You get whatever your damages are. And it looks like, according to this, now this is needs to be verified, but if you as you might imagine, international flights involve a lot of different jurisdictions. but it looks like you can sue you can start the lawsuit for the most part, and this must be dictated by this treaty, the Montreal Convention. So the airline's headquarters, the airline's principal place of business, which may or may not be the same, the final destination that the ticket was supposed to get you to. Now I assume that's for the actual plane, even if you were going to transfer flights, I imagine it's for the final destination for the flight that you're on, so you could sue there. The place where the ticket was purchased. Now I don't know what that means. That I don't know if that necessarily means it's in the state where state or country where the flight took off. That would seem to make sense to me, but I'm not sure about that. And apparently, it also allows people to sue in the state or country where the injured people reside if the airline operates there, and it says that those lawsuits must be filed within 2 years. Now, I've never had one of those cases. I doubt I ever will, but that's sort of interesting. I did not know that. Um, so I'm sure there will be a lot of lawyers getting up to speed on that with these recent events going on. Um, while I was doing this research, so this is a story I want to wrap up with. I had no idea that there had been a plane crash close to here. So I'm in Wisconsin. So across the river into Minnesota, there was a plane crash back in the 1940s. Or was it the 19? Let me see here. 1948. And this one was sort of interesting because it's very close to here. It's very close where I went to college. I went to college in Winona. It happened kind of above the Mississippi. And so it's Northwest Orient Airlines 421 was a passenger flight. This was an airplane, not a jet, from took off in Chicago and was supposed to land in Minneapolis. And it was a Martin 2-0-2 aircraft. I don't know what that is. I think if you saw the thumbnail for this, there was a picture of it. Let me see here. Maybe I can put it on the screen here. Let's see here. I'll show you the plane. StreamYard just started allowing us to show images. Yeah, there we go. I don't think this is the actual plane that was involved in the crash, but it's the type of plane that was involved in the crash. So the plane was taking off took off in Chicago, was going to land in Minneapolis. So I would say it was roughly halfway there. And it sounds like they encountered a thunderstorm over over Winona, and there's some indication that they had maybe got hit by lightning. But what they did find, so let me kind of finish the story. So the oh, there we go. So the pilots, the one pilot had 5,500 hours of flight time. The co-pilot had 2,300. There was one stewardess on board, and so left Midway Airport. Now, Midway um, had a very close mishap just in the last week. I know I think it was a Southwest Airlines flight was trying to land there, and there was a private jet cross in front of them. There's a show I watch. If I think of it, I'll link to it. It's called Pilot Debrief, and I think he's a former military pilot that does these really, really in-depth and helpful discussions of plane incidents. It drives my wife crazy that I watch this. She's like, "Why do you ever want to fly again?" But I don't know. I find it interesting. But he did one on it, and it looks like the Yeah, the private plane had passed in front of the plane on the runway that was trying to land. That had the right to land, and they didn't. They got miscommunication on the instructions for the departure. So thankfully, no one was injured in that, but that was a close call. So this plane back in 1948 was taken off from Midway, and they were at about 7,000 feet, and there was people on the ground that said they saw thunder and lightning in the area, and there was actually an off-duty Northwest Airlines pilot. The name of Jack Vogel living in Winona. He said it seemed to him he had seen it fall out of the sky, that it was struck by lightning. There was apparently some farmers in the area that said it seemed like the plane barrel rolled. But what they had found is that I think the one wing separated from the plane. So there was like some sort of a design defect, and they grounded a bunch of other planes and found these stress fractures in the plane where the wing attached to the fuselage. Yeah, so they found a fatigue crack on this plane, and so I don't know whatever happened. I mean, unfortunately, everyone on board was killed, so there was like 37 people on board, including the flight staff, the pilots, and whatnot. Everyone was killed, unfortunately, but they crashed on the bluff. I think on the Wisconsin side. Let me see here. I think I have a picture of the. Um, let me see here. Let me see if I can make that bigger. I don't know. That doesn't help very much. Um, so this is just a screenshot I took. So on the left side here is bottom left is Winona, Minnesota. This is the Mississippi River, kind of down the middle of it. And if you're not familiar with it, the Mississippi, there's bluffs up on both sides of the Mississippi River, and it crashed sort of on the side of the bluff on the Wisconsin side. I think the little town there is called Fountain City, and they talked about having to like form a human chain of people down the side of this bluff to be able to get the bodies. All the bodies were still in the plane, and they had to retrieve the bodies and stuff. And not a lot of information online about the crash. There was some pictures I found in the local historical society and things like that, but I had no idea that this crash had happened so close to where I live and where I had gone to college. But that's the yeah. So that happened near Winona. I'm sure there was some lawsuits and litigation that stemmed from that, and but I did read that there had been a lawsuit by the airline company against the. Was this a Boeing product? Let me see here. What was the name of the? No. So in April of 1949, Northwest Airlines sued the Glenn Martin Company. Looks like they're no longer in business, but they were the manufacturer of the Martin 202. They sued for 200 or for $725,000 for five defective aircraft, including the one that crashed. I don't know if they were able to repair them or what they did. I don't know. I wouldn't be excited to get up in a plane that had stress fractures in it, or at least had a history of that. But that was nearby. That was in Winona, Minnesota. So I have to go check that next time I'm up there. I'm going to see if there isn't some sort of a monument or something along the side of the road. That would be on the Wisconsin side of the road of the river. see if there's something there. But yeah, that was I actually learned something out of this, and so crashes do happen, and they're apparently not that much different than other um, types of crashes. But there are lawyers out there that handle these kinds of cases. So if for some reason I had um, gotten a call from someone that was seriously injured or worse in a plane crash, and they needed some heavy duty litigation, I'd probably co-counsel with a lawyer or law firm that has more experience with these things, just because I would be a little bit out of my element. So yeah. um, so hopefully that's the end of the airplane mishaps out there. But if it does happen, this sort of gives you an overview of the legal process that takes place if they do. So, okay, well, I'm going to go ahead and wrap this up. I appreciate everyone who watches this video. If you have any questions or comments, go ahead and leave them in the comments below. I'll do my best to answer them. I should be back to live streaming again tomorrow morning, so I will be live streaming pretty much every day at 5:30 a.m. Central Time. Maybe on the weekends I'll sleep a little bit and I'll do it more like 6 or 6:30. But I'm kind of an early morning guy, and so it'll be a fairly regular occurrence. Even when I'm in trial, maybe especially when I'm in trial, I'll be able to hop on and live stream in the morning. So if you guys have any questions or topics you'd like to hear about, especially, let me know. I will do a little research if I don't know the answer, and I'll try to cover it as soon as I can in the next live stream. So appreciate everyone for watching, and until next time, everyone, have a good one.